Now, see, the next topic that we are going to cover up is called as carbon credit. It's called as what? It's called as carbon credit. And also carbon trading. Carbon credit and carbon trading. Clear? We can see that the Kyoto Protocol was signed. Kyoto Protocol was signed in 1997. Clear? See, I'll take a break at 8:30. We'll take a break. Clear? 8:30, 8:45. We'll take a break after completing this, and then we'll again sit. We'll take the dinner, and then we'll again sit for half an hour. We'll have a break. Yes, I'm taking warm water now. This is warm water, and I'll have something, but let's complete this topic, that is carbon credit and carbon trading, and then we'll have a break of half an hour to have the dinner. Then we continue. Fine. Now, that's called as carbon credit and carbon trading. Now we know that Kyoto Protocol was signed in 1997, and under the Kyoto Protocol we can see the developed nations were asked to reduce their carbon emissions by 5.2%. So that should be reduced. The carbon emissions by developed nations should be reduced by 5.2%. That was Kyoto Protocol. But from where? From where the carbon emissions should be reduced? So the base year for this purpose was, base year from where the emissions would be counted, would be the year 1990. So from the year 1990, we would be responsible for reducing carbon emission. Clear? So from the year 1990, we would be responsible for reducing carbon emissions. They would be responsible for, from the year 1990, the emissions would be counted, and then 5.2% needs to be. Now, the Kyoto Protocol came into force in the year 2005, and the first phase of Kyoto Protocol was 2005 to 2012. But if suppose there were two drawbacks of this protocol. The first drawback of this protocol was what? That US, which was the biggest emitter at that time, was not a signatory to this protocol. Clear? US, which was the biggest emitter at that time, was not a signatory to this protocol. And the second problem was what? That developing nations like India and China, although they signed it, but they were never asked to reduce their emissions, because in the process of industrialization, they were considered as late industrializers. Clear? So they were never asked to reduce their emissions, because in the process of industrialization, they were considered as late industrializers. Fine. So this was done. Very good. Now we can see that this benefit came to India and China, but when we are talking about that, suppose you are from developed nation, and on you the binding obligation is there to reduce your carbon emission, what you would be responsible for doing? First of all, you would be responsible for establishing carbon reduction project. Clear? You would be responsible for establishing carbon reduction project. And when we are talking about carbon reduction projects are those projects which are based on non-conventional sources, renewable energy, solar energy, tidal energy. Clear? So these are carbon reduction projects which needs to be established. And if suppose you establish a carbon reduction project, certainly you would be earning, you would be reducing emission. And for reducing emission, a certificate would be allocated to you. Now, this certificate which is allocated for reducing emission is called as what? It is called as carbon credit. Clear? देखो मान लो कि तुमने एमिशंस को कम किया कार्बन रिडक्शन प्रोजेक्ट लगाकर, तो जब एमिशंस को आपने कम किया कार्बन रिडक्शन प्रोजेक्ट को लगाकर, तो देयर वुड बी अ सर्टिफिकेट गिवन टू यू, एक सर्टिफिकेट तुम्हें दिया जाएगा. नाउ दिस सर्टिफिकेट वुड बी कॉल्ड एज व्हाट? दिस सर्टिफिकेट वुड बी कॉल्ड एज नथिंग बट कार्बन क्रेडिट. एंड सर्टेनली इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि मैं थोड़ा कम कर रहा हूँ, तुम ज़्यादा कर रहे हो, तुम्हें भी मिल रहा है, मुझे भी मिल रहा है. देयर शुड बी अ क्वांटिफिकेशन ऑफ दिस. It should be quantified as such. So the quantification of this is what? That if suppose 1 metric ton of CO2 is reduced, मान लो 1 metric ton CO2 reduce करते हैं, तो एक सर्टिफिकेट दिया जाएगा, एक सर्टिफिकेट दिया जाएगा. क्लियर? क्रेडिट मतलब सर्टिफिकेट. Now this certificate would be given by whom? It would be given by UNFCCC. That is United Nations Framework for Convention on Climate Change. So this certificate would be given by UNFCCC, and this certificate would be called as what? It is called as carbon credit. Now this is also referred to as what? It is also referred to as certified emission reductions. Certified emission reduction means certificate for emissions reduction. So that's what called as carbon credit. Clear? जैसे देखो suppose Delhi Metro. Now, when Delhi Metro was established, or any other metro was established, now we can see lakhs and lakhs of people commute through Delhi Metro. They are commuting through Delhi Metro. So, if suppose Delhi Metro was not established, they would have commuted through transport vehicles. So, the emissions would have enhanced. So, by establishment of Delhi Metro, the emissions have reduced. So, Delhi Metro would be eligible for carbon credit. Clear? It would be eligible for carbon credit. So we can see that as far as Kyoto Protocol is concerned, under the Kyoto Protocol, there are there are 3 mechanisms under carbon credit and carbon trading. Now the first mechanism under carbon credit and carbon trading is called as what? It is referred to as joint implementation. देखो पहला mechanism. The first mechanism is called as what? Joint implementation. Now what does that mean? It means that in this case, suppose on one side is a developed nation, and the developed nation has to establish carbon reduction project, but is unable to do so. वो नहीं कर सक रहा है, unable to do so. Why? Because there is paucity of space, shortage of space ka, or there may be other reasons also. So what this developed nation does, this developed nation is responsible for transferring its carbon reduction project to another developed nation. This developed nation is responsible for transferring the carbon reduction project to another developed nation. The first nation is responsible for maintaining it. The second nation is the first nation is responsible for establishing it. That is, investment is made by the first nation. The second nation is responsible for maintaining it. So both the nations are involved. It is a carbon reduction project. So carbon credits would be earned for this purpose. But these carbon credits which are earned by this project would be equally shared by both the nations. Clear? So we are saying that this is a carbon reduction project. So the credits would be earned. But these credits which are earned would be equally shared by both the nations. Clear? Would be equally shared by both the nations. So this mechanism of establishment of carbon reduction project and equally sharing by both the nation would be called as what? It would be called as joint implementation. Clear? It would be referred to as joint implementation. The second mechanism is called as what? It is called as clean development mechanism. It's called as clean development mechanism. On one side we have the developed nation, and on the other side we have developing nation. So, we can see that in this case, the transference of a CRP by carbon reduction project would be from a developed nation to a developing nation. Clear? The transference of a carbon reduction project would be from a developed nation to a developing nation. The developed nation would be responsible for establishing it, and developing nation is responsible for maintaining it. But then the carbon credits which are earned from the carbon reduction projects would be only going to the developed nation. Clear? And why only going to the developed nation? Because for developing nation, carbon credits are not important. For developed nation, what is important? For developed nation, what is important is money. For developed nation, what is important is technology, because it wants to develop. And it's not, the credits are not important for developing nation, because developing nation under the Kyoto Protocol was not under binding obligation to reduce its carbon emissions as such. And since they have not emitted, they had additional carbon credits also. So, surplus carbon credit was present with them. Clear? But what is the benefit that they are getting? The benefit that they are getting is, although the credits are going to the developed nation, the developed nation would be responsible for supplying developing nation two things. One is technology and second is money. So, they are supplying developing nations with two things, technology and money. Clear? And that is why in the case of clean development mechanism, who is getting more benefited? The developing nation is getting more benefited, because developing nation is getting better environment. Developing nation is getting not only better environment, but also developing nation is getting technology and also money. The threefold benefit goes to the developing nation as such. Clear? Threefold benefit goes to the developing nation. What is the use of these carbon credits? See, the use of this carbon credits is what? That developing nation can show it. These carbon credits would be counted under the account of developed nation for reducing the emissions by 5.2%. Clear? Clear? Clear, Rishika? Fine. Now, this is the use of carbon credit, and this is now, since it is called as clean development mechanism, why? Because the developing nation is getting a clean technology for itself. That's why it is called as clean development mechanism. But see, if this was the benchmark which was set earlier, this is the benchmark which was set earlier, that crossing this benchmark, that binding obligation would be imposed on you to reduce your emissions. But then we say that the developing nation's emission is here. Clear? Here is developing nation's emission. Now, this difference of the benchmark set and the emissions of developing nation would be called as what? This would be called as surplus carbon credit for developing nation. Clear? Surplus carbon credit for developing nation, which the nation can sell in the international market to fetch money, to earn money. Who would be the buyers? The buyers would be the developed nations. Clear? Developed nation. Now, this mechanism is called as what? This mechanism is called as international emission trading. This mechanism is called as international emission trading. International emission trading. Is that clear? Fine. International emission trading. Clear? So, this is called as international emission trading. Now, thank you so much, Amit Kumar also. Now, we can see that trading took place at two agencies. One was Chicago Climate Exchange, where trading took place. And second agency where trading took place was European Climate Exchange. European Climate Exchange. And European Climate Exchange is present where? It is present in London. So we can see Chicago Climate Exchange and also European Climate Exchange, which is present in London. Clear? Fine. But we can see recently the prices of carbon credits have declined. And it's not only due to the COVID pandemic that the prices of carbon credits have declined, but the prices of carbon credit, have declined. Thank you so much, Amit Kumar. The prices of carbon credits have declined. Why? The prices of carbon credits have declined because the Western world is suffering from economic crisis. And the companies of the Western world are not producing enough to be in requirement of more and more of carbon credit. If suppose they would have produced more, then the requirement of carbon credit would have been more. Clear? So they are not producing enough to be in a requirement of more and more of carbon credit. And since the demand of carbon credit is less, that's why we say that the prices of carbon credits have declined. That's why we say that the prices. I'll take a break. I'll take a break at exactly 8:45. Let's complete this. Fine. I'll take a break as exactly 8:45. Then we'll have a dinner, half an hour dinner, and then we'll resume. Clear? So that's called as what? We can say international emission trading. And the prices of carbon credits have declined recently, not only because of the COVID pandemic, because of the Western world is suffering from economic crisis. So the companies of the Western world are not producing enough to be in requirement of more and more of carbon credit. If suppose the requirement of carbon credit would have been more, if the requirement of carbon credit would have been more, अभिषेक बच्चे कितना टाइम लगेगा? आज थोड़ा सा मेहनत कर लो बेटा, कल देखो तो कल तुम्हें बहुत चीज़ डिफरेंस नजर आएगा खुद इन्वायरमेंट में तुम्हें प्रिपरेशन के। बस आज थोड़ा मैं अभी नहीं बोलूँगा कितनी देर लगेंगे, क्योंकि मैं सेलेक्ट कर रहा हूँ टॉपिक। इसमें बहुत जगह मैंने छोड़ा है बहुत चीज़ों को, और उसके बाद ये देख रहा हूँ कि क्या इंपॉर्टेंट है प्रिलिमिनरी एग्जामिनेशन के लिए, वो सिर्फ सेलेक्ट करके बोलते जा रहा हूँ। क्लियर? क्योंकि ये तो अथाह है। I have 100 years of class in my head. Not 100 years, sorry, 100 hours of class in my head. Sorry. And that if suppose I deliver, then but the perspective is also mains examination. For PT examination, I'm cutting short those things, because that won't be asked in preliminary examination. Fine, but अभी कुछ देर और, अभी 8:45 में लेंगे ब्रेक। देखो अभी तो इतना टाइम तो हो ही गया है, 8:14, जस्ट हाफ एन आवर विल टेक, आफ्टर हाफ एन आवर विल टेक ब्रेक, 20 मिनट्स के बाद ब्रेक ले लेते हैं, 20-25 मिनट्स बस। 100 hours, 100 hours of class, I can go on and on, don't worry about that. And I'm not with any PDF, etc., etc., etc. I'm not with any. Only the thing is your questions before me. Otherwise, helpless. There are some articles for drinking, etc. Otherwise, nothing in front of me. I can go on and on. Now, clear? ठीक है, एक ब्रेक लेंगे हम लोग आफ्टर 20 minutes, 25 minutes we'll take a break. Now this, listen, let's go. The prices of carbon credits have declined. Why? Because he said that not only COVID pandemic, but also the Western world is suffering from economic crisis. Their companies are not producing enough to be in requirement of more and more of carbon credit. Clear? There is a correlation between your development and emissions. Now this correlation, if suppose your GDP is enhancing, our country's GDP is enhancing, our emissions would be also enhancing. So this correlation between the GDP and the emission is called as what? This is called as कार्बन इंटेंसिटी ऑफ जीडीपी, इसे क्या कहते हैं? कार्बन इंटेंसिटी ऑफ जीडीपी. This correlation between GDP and emission is called as carbon intensity of GDP. And we can see that there is a curve in environment which is called as Kuznets curve. Kuznets curve environment का मतलब है कि all nations they start their journey as dirty nations. All nations they start their journey as dirty nation. Dirty nation का मतलब है कि when they develop they emit more. Clear? So all the, and only after some time they would be having the funds to take measures to reduce or mitigate the damage. Now that's called as Kuznets curve of environment. So there's an intensity which is called as carbon intensity of GDP. Yes, Russia, Ukraine war demanding weapons. So yes, carbon emissions will definitely, and that would be responsible for long-standing impact also. We never know that there are some impacts which we would be visualizing in future because of this war. And in the longer run only, yes, listening to you, thank you so much, Cristiano Ronaldo is just like Nirvana. अच्छा, अब सुनो इसे थोड़ा और सुन लो. That's dirty nation, and that's called as carbon intensity of GDP. But also remember that the connect is what? Article 6 of the Paris Declaration deals with Article 6, this can be asked in examination. Article 6 of the Paris Declaration deals with what? Deals with the carbon market mechanism. Deals with the carbon market mechanism. Clear? Article 6 of the Paris Declaration deals with the carbon market mechanism, and we can see that under the Kyoto Protocol, India's credit worth 5,000 crore rupees is unutilized. So India is negotiating for this purpose so that India can utilize these carbon credits. 5,000 crore is lying unutilized. So India is negotiating for this purpose that these credits can be utilized by India. Clear? Fine, this much in carbon. But only one thing which is left here. That Kyoto Protocol was responsible for dividing countries into three categories. One is called as Annex 1 countries. Second is called as Annex 2 countries. And third is called as what? Non-Annex 1 countries. Annex 1 countries. Second is called as Annex 2 countries. And third is called as non-Annex 1 countries. When we talk about Annex 1 countries, there are 41 in Annex 1 countries, and these are all developed countries. Developed countries. These are developed countries, and on whom binding obligation is imposed to reduce their carbon emissions. So these are called as Annex 1 countries. And the second is called as Annex 2 countries. So that 26 in number, and all of them are part of Annex 1. So part of Annex 1 means automatically that they are developed nation and they are under binding obligation to reduce their carbon emission. But why so different that they should be placed in Annex 2 categories? Now they are placed in Annex 2 categories because they are responsible for funding. They are responsible for funding carbon reduction project in developing nations. So they are responsible for funding carbon reduction project in developing nations. So they are called as Annex 2. And when we talk about non-Annex 1 country, non-Annex 1 country are generally developing nations. So these are what? These are developing nations. Developing nations. And we can see that these developing nations, they have no binding obligations. No binding obligations. Clear? So Annex 1, Annex 2, non-Annex 1 countries they are. Now we are now ready to solve a test. Now let's see that whether the test can be solved or not by this information that we have gathered. देखो एक एक करके मैं क्वेश्चन सेट कर रहा हूँ, तुम जवाब देते जाओ। See the first question. That's your test 3. Fine. And the first question. Consider the following statements and select the correct code. Carbon footprint measures the amount of greenhouse gases produced by an individual or by an industrial unit in our day-to-day lives. It is measured in terms of tons or kgs of CO2 equivalent. Carbon footprint of a British citizen is maximum in the world. Tell me what is the correct answer. Now, as far as yes, B would be the correct answer. Why? Because carbon footprint definition is correct. It's not only the amount of greenhouse gases produced by individual, but also by industrial unit. Clear? Industrial unit in our day-to-day lives. That's called as carbon footprint. It is measured in terms of tons or kgs of CO2 equivalent. That's also true. And carbon footprint of a British, no, it's American citizen. American citizen is maximum in the world. That's, this statement is wrong. Clear? This statement is wrong. US, China, India order. ठीक है, fine, very good. Now, देखो इंडिया का कार्बन फुटप्रिंट कम है, और इंडिया का कार्बन फुटप्रिंट इसलिए कम है क्योंकि आबादी इंडिया में ज़्यादा है और ज़्यादातर इंडियंस रूरल एरियाज में भी रहते हैं, तो इसलिए कार्बन फुटप्रिंट इंडिया का 10 times लेस देन दैट ऑफ द डेवलप्ड वर्ल्ड. सो बी ऑप्शन इज करेक्ट. क्लियर? नाउ लेट्स सी द सेकंड क्वेश्चन. अब देखो बच्चों, सेकंड क्वेश्चन पूरा रिवाइज करते चलो इसे अच्छी तरह से. कंसीडर फॉलोइंग स्टेटमेंट्स एंड सेलेक्ट द करेक्ट कोड. ओशियंस अब्जॉर्ब 30% ऑफ कार्बन एमिशंस. हाँ ठीक है, कह सकते हैं. CO2 absorbed by oceans is utilized by phytoplankton for photosynthesis. There are limitations to oceans' ability to absorb CO2 because only top 300 meters of the ocean are in contact with the atmosphere. Tell me, what is the correct answer? Tell me, what is the correct answer? A. Definitely invincible, that's A, correct. Good. Good. Very good. Very good, very good. Fine. Very good. Now see, that's A. Now next question. And this we know, we have discussed that. Consider the following gases: nitrous oxide, methane, ozone, carbon dioxide, CFCs. Which of the above are greenhouse gases? Tell me. Question number 3. Question number 3. That's A. Okay, that's A. Correct, because ozone itself is a greenhouse gas, and all these are ozone depleting substances also, apart from ozone, and also greenhouse gases. So all are greenhouse gases as such. Clear? Now, fourth question. Which one of the following statement is incorrect? The temperature of Earth in absence of greenhouse gases would be minus 20 degrees centigrade. Is that correct? I think that's correct. Incoming cosmic rays are long wavelength radiation. No, they are not long wavelength radiation. They happen to be short wavelength radiation. The incoming cosmic rays would be only of short wavelength radiation. So that's incorrect. You can judge that. We have discussed that. And the rest is correct. See, next question. Consider the following, fifth question. Consider the following statements and select the correct code. India belongs to non-Annex 1 category of countries. Just now we have studied. Yes, that's true. Annex 1 included developed countries on whom the binding obligation of UNFCCC holds. That's also true. Annex 2 countries are members of Annex 1 also. That's also true. So, all the three statements are correct. Which of the following statement is incorrect? Cryosphere lies above the permafrost line. Clear? Yes, you can see cryosphere is IGDS, so it will be present above the permafrost line. Very good. Now, these are easy questions. Yes, yes, yes. Very easy questions. Now, I'll ask you. I'll ask you. The cryosphere is responsible for moderating the temperature of Earth. True. Because of albedo phenomena. Depletion of cryosphere can enhance the adverse impact of global warming. Yes, true. Now, what is wrong is melting of cryosphere is responsible for absorption of CO2. It's responsible for emission of CO2. Which one of the following statement is incorrectly matched? Blue water, rivers and lakes, green water purified through osmosis, grey water, contaminated water after household use, paleo water, water contained in undisturbed space. Is that? Which is the correct answer? Incorrectly matched. Which is incorrectly matched? Now, incorrectly matched is B, that is green water. Clear? Green water is not. When you are talking about green water, it is the fraction of rainfall. It's a fraction of rainfall trapped in soil used for cultivation. That's called as green water. It's not purified through osmosis, that it is called as green water. Clear? And blue water is present, grey water is contaminated. Paleo water means, paleo water is what? The water which is underground. Underground water can be of two types. One is green water, which is the fraction of rainfall which is trapped inside the soil. And second would be paleo water. Paleo water is called as also fossil water, which is present in undisturbed space. So, underground water can be of two types. One is green water and second is paleo water or fossil water. Now, which one of the following statement is incorrect? National parks are open for scientific, educational or recreational use. Harvesting and collection of minor forest products are allowed in wildlife sanctuaries. Biosphere reserves are meant not only for protection of biodiversity, but also cultural diversity. Core areas of biosphere reserves are managed by. Now, tell me which is the incorrect answer in 8. Which is the incorrect answer in 8? 8D. Yes, correct. D is the incorrect answer. Yes, paleo means rocks. The water which is trapped inside the undisturbed space is the rock, and that's why which is called as paleo water or fossil water. So, I said that underground water would be of two parts. One is green water and second is paleo water. So, the answer is D. Why? Because core areas of biosphere reserve you have studied was managed by 3 acts. The Forest Act of 1927, the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, and also the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. Now, consider the following statements and select the correct code. Can you answer this? 9th question. There are 3 statements over here. Can you say that which is the correct option? Ninth question. Which is the correct option? Now, the correct option is A. 9th, all the statements are correct. But remember these statements for your examination, because they have asked you a question on this also. So please remember these statements for your examination. Which one of the following statement is incorrect? 10, you can easily say that which is incorrect. 10th one. Biomethanation is a process by which organic matter is microbiologically converted into anaerobic condition to produce biogas. Biogas consists of only methane. That's wrong. So B would be incorrect answer, I think. B would be incorrect answer. Yes, definitely B is incorrect answer. Plasma gasification is used for waste treatment, converts organic matter into synthetic gas. Because all these three processes, pyrolysis, biomethanation, plasma gasification. Now, all these processes were used in Solid Waste Management Act 2016-17, which is based on what? Which is based on waste to energy. So, from waste, we would be developing energy. So, these processes were used. Remember these processes because they are very important for your examination also, and they have been asked, one or two processes have been asked. Now, see. Consider the following statements and select the correct code. National Chambal Sanctuary, that's question number 11. National Chambal Sanctuary is situated at the tri-junction of three states. Is that true? The nest of gharial gets disturbed because of sand mining on the river Chambal. And Deori Gharial Rearing and Hatching Center is located in Sagar district of Madhya Pradesh. Gharials, according to IUCN, is vulnerable species. Yes, most of the students are from KG. Now see, we can see that as far as this question is concerned, the first is correct option. Why? Because it is situated at the tri-junction of three states, and that is what? Rajasthan, UP and Madhya Pradesh. That's correct. The nest of gharial gets disturbed because of sand mining activities on Chambal. That's true. Deori Gharial Rearing and Hatching Center is located in Sagar district of Madhya Pradesh. That's wrong, because this is located in Morena district. And gharial, according to IUCN, is vulnerable species. That's also wrong, because critically endangered. कुछ ही बचे हुए हैं, critically endangered. So, we can see first and second option would be the correct option. Clear? Gharial initially were present where? These river gharial. 4 is wrong. Yes. See. First is correct. Second is correct. Third is wrong because it is located in Morena district of Madhya Pradesh, and gharials are critically endangered. Clear? So 1 and 2 would be the correct option. 1 and 2 would be the correct option. That's your C. Clear? And see, initially gharials were initially gharials were present in river Ganga and Yamuna, but they have shifted from Ganga and Yamuna when Ganga and Yamuna became contaminated. Clear? So they have shifted to Chambal river, and they are on the verge of decline. They won't be surviving for, there are surviving for, few are present there, and they would be surviving for only some years. They would become extinct. So, in this center, the eggs are brought of gharial from Chambal rivers and they are hatched. When gharials gain a certain length, then they are reverted back into the Chambal river. The last question. It is managed by Madhya Pradesh, Morena district. Now, next last question. The IUCN recently reclassified snow leopard as vulnerable from its previous classification of endangered. That's true. Snow leopard are found from Central Asia to Himalayas. That's also true. Clear? That's also true. Both are correct statement. And why they have reclassified it? Because the number of snow leopards enhanced. Clear? Number of snow leopards enhanced. That is the reason for its reclassification. Now we'll have a lunch break now. Clear? Of 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and then we'll continue. Both are true. Yes, both are true. Both are correct. A is the correct option. Now, before going into the break, we were discussing the questions related to global warming and climate change. Now, first of all, sometimes it also happens that you prepare the entire book, but not a single question would be asked from there. Clear? चीता को 3 बीवी हुए हैं 7, very good. All these are information that you have. 22. Yes, Petersburg Declaration is that. Now, अच्छा ठीक है, good conversation related to cheetah and kuno and tiger population. Now, sometimes it may also happen that you prepare the entire book, but not a single question may be asked from the book. And they would be asking you questions from terminology, terms only. So, today let's discuss some terms related to global warming and climate change. And all these terms are significant for us. Let's see how. So, let's discuss these terms. Now, the first term that we are going to discuss is called as what? It is called as carbon budget, carbon justice, and carbon share. That's the first term. Let's discuss these terms. When we talk about carbon budget, carbon justice, and carbon share, we are reminded of the Paris Declaration. Clear? We are reminded of the Paris Declaration. Now, the Paris Declaration said that temperature enhancement of Earth. Paris Declaration is what? Paris Declaration is nothing but COP 21st, and was passed in the year 2015. COP 21st, and was passed in the year 2015. So, when we are talking about Paris Declaration, we can see Paris Declaration is what? Paris Declaration says that the temperature enhancement of Earth, I am saying that temperature enhancement of Earth should be less than 2 degrees centigrade. Less than 2 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. That should be the temperature enhancement. Less than 2 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. That's Paris Declaration. But when we talk about Paris Declaration, we can see Paris Declaration also says that it would be better if nations try to, what is global dimming? I'll discuss global dimming, don't worry. Now, it would be said that it would be better that if nations try to attain the target of less than 1.5 degrees centigrade enhancement. First, the Paris Declaration says that the temperature enhancement of Earth should be less than 2 degrees centigrade. But it also says that it would be better that nations try to attain the target of less than 1.5 degrees centigrade enhancement. Clear? This is Paris Declaration. Now, emissions have taken place in the past. Emissions would take place in the future also. Emissions have taken place in the past. Emissions would take place in the future. Now, from where we are calculating this temperature enhancement? Now, we are calculating this temperature enhancement from where? We are calculating this temperature enhancement from 400 years back, that is a pre-industrialization level temperature. Clear? So, we are responsible for calculating this temperature enhancement 400 years back, the pre-industrialization level enhancement. And we can see that emissions have taken place in the past. Emissions have taken place in the past. So, if suppose we calculate from 400 years back. That's the base temperature of Earth where it's calculated. 400 years back till 2015. And from 2015, we are responsible for calculating till the end of this century. So here we say, this is the emission of past. Emission of past. And this is what? The emission of future. This is emission of past and this is emission of future. Now, the condition is what? The condition is that this you cannot reduce because already you have emitted. But this you can curtail. This you can check. So, the condition is what? That if suppose we count this sum total of emission, ये दोनों को जोड़ कर देखते हैं, sum total of emission. Now, this sum total of emission, so that the target of Paris Declaration is met, is referred to as what? It is referred to as carbon budget, or it is called as what? It is called as carbon commons. So we can say that this would be called as what? It would be called as carbon budget, or it would be called as carbon commons. The sum total of emissions, or carbon commons. And the irony is what? Yes, zero carbon, we will discuss that. But the irony is what? The irony is that 3/4 of the carbon budget already has been utilized. We have said that 3/4 of the carbon budget has already been utilized. Out of the, and only 1/4 is remaining today. And for this we have 85 years. Clear? For this we have 85 years. So out of the 1/4 remaining today, each and every nation would be allocated their carbon share. We are saying that each and every nation would be allocated their carbon share. Out of the 1/4 remaining, we say that each and every nation would be allocated their carbon share. And developing nations want more and more of carbon share. And why more and more of carbon share developing nations want? Developing nations want more of carbon share. Why? Because they haven't developed. And if they develop, carbon emissions would take place more. So they want more and more of carbon share as such. Clear? Developing nations want more and more of carbon share as such. And if suppose developing nations are responsible for reporting more and more of carbon shares, then we can see developing nations are responsible for more and more of carbon share. It is in this context that the term carbon justice is given, that developing nations should be given more and more of carbon share. Clear? Now we are saying, I repeat once more, that the Paris Declaration says that the temperature enhancement of Earth should be less than 2 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. This is Paris Declaration, COP 21st, 2015. But the Paris Declaration also mentions that it would be better if nations try to attain the temperature enhancement of less than 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now, less than 1.5 degrees centigrade is based on the IPCC report. The IPCC assessment report of 2015 said that why the world cannot afford temperature enhancement beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade. This was said by IPCC report, that why the world cannot afford temperature enhancement beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade. Clear? And in this report, it has been said that that even if suppose we meet the target of 1.5 degrees centigrade, 70 to 90% of corals would vanish. Clear? So IPCC was responsible for suggesting certain pathways for this purpose, and we'll discuss about the pathways also. But this is called as what? This is called as the Paris Declaration. Now we are calculating the temperature of Earth. Base temperature for this purpose has been taken, temperature of Earth 400 years back. That is the base temperature, the pre-industrialization level temperature. And then the incremental temperature would be calculated. Now, we say that that emissions have taken place in the past, emissions would be taking place in the future. So if we combine together the emissions of past and the emissions of future, that's the sum total of emissions. Then we can see that the only conditionality is what? That the target of the Paris Declaration is met. So this sum total of emission would be called as what? This sum total of emission would be referred to as carbon budget, or would be called as carbon commons. And the irony is what? That 3/4 of the carbon budget has been utilized, only 1/4 is remaining, and in this each and every nation should be allocated their carbon share. So it is in this context that the term carbon justice is given, because developing nations aspire for more and more of carbon share. Clear? Developing nations aspire for more and more of carbon share. But see, the another term is called as what? It is called as, and remember that when you are talking about the temperature enhancement of Earth, what is the temperature of Earth? The temperature of Earth in the 20th century was 15.8 degrees centigrade. That's the average temperature of Earth in the 20th century, 15.8 degree centigrade. And July 2021, according to the IPCC 6th assessment report, was considered as what? Was considered as the hottest month ever recorded. And why hottest month ever recorded? Because this month registered a temperature of more than 0.9 degrees centigrade than the average temperature of Earth recorded in the 20th century. IPCC 6th assessment report also talks about temperature enhancement like this manner, and also says that the three gases which are emitted, greenhouse gases which are emitted largely, are what? First is CO2, second is methane, and third is nitrous oxide. Abundant. CO2 is emitted in abundance, then is methane, and there is nitrous oxide. The IPCC assessment report, 6th assessment report, also says that Mumbai is likely to suffer, vulnerable due to rise in sea level. So the city of India which would be suffering due to rise in sea level is Mumbai, and the city of India which would be suffering from heat waves is Ahmedabad. So two cities of India have been mentioned in the IPCC report, 6th assessment report as such. Clear? See, all these temperature are calculated. See, in 1997, we had an agreement was signed between the World Resource Institute and the World Business Council of Sustainable Development. That was in 1997. Now that agreement is called as GHG Protocol, Greenhouse Gases Protocol. Now the purpose of this agreement is to monitor, measure, manage emission, and it is this agreement that determined that what emissions have taken place in the past according to the temperature enhancement which is calculated. Is that clear? Fine. Now there's another term that you have to know, and that term is called as what? We have completed what is called as carbon commons, carbon share, and carbon justice. But there's another term which is called as climate justice. Climate justice. And climate justice means that when we talk about temperature enhancement and global warming taking place, the adverse impact of global warming and temperature enhancement would be on certain segments of society more when compared to others. Clear? The adverse impact of global warming and temperature enhancement would be more on certain segments of society when compared to others. Clear? And for example, marginal farmers would be suffering because of global warming more. For example, women, particularly in rural areas, are suffering due to adverse impact of global warming more. So if suppose we are taking any initiative for their betterment, then these initiative would be coming under the domain of, it would be coming under the domain of what is called as climate justice. Clear? This initiative would be coming under the domain of what is called as climate justice. Now under this initiative we can see that Maharashtra, government of Maharashtra was responsible for launching an initiative, and that initiative is called as what? It is called as Climate Adaptive Agriculture. Now that initiative is called as Climate Adaptive Agriculture. Now climate adaptive agriculture means what? See, the farmers of Maharashtra were vulnerable for droughts. Although if you suppose compare the rainfall in Rajasthan and rainfall in Maharashtra, rainfall in Maharashtra is more than compared to Rajasthan. But the vulnerability for droughts for farmers of Maharashtra was more. Why? Because the farmers of Maharashtra tended to cultivate those crops which are water intensive in nature. For example, sugarcane. That's why the vulnerability enhanced. Clear? A small island also, coastal community also, yes, vulnerability for them would be certainly high, and for them also climate justice would be there. Now, we can see the marginal farmers have a problem. Marginal farmers have shortage of land. Marginal farmers have shortage of water sources. So, suppose if any initiative is taken for them, it would be also falling under the domain of climate justice. So, the government of Maharashtra was responsible for launching an initiative, and this initiative is called as what? It is called as Climate Adaptive Agriculture. And climate adaptive agriculture means what? There are three main ingredients of this. First is water harvesting on a large scale. So, we can say yes, water harvesting should be conducted on a large scale. Then second is, we would be also responsible for developing resilience among farmers. So, resilience among farmers would be developed how? It would be developed by sustainable management of the area. Sustainable management of the area. So, we would be responsible for developing resilience among farmers through sustainable management of the area. And then suppose if by taking these steps also, what happens is the crop production fails. Crop production fails. Then what would be done is that establishment of climate index insurance would take place, and this climate index insurance would be helping the farmers in case of what? In case of crop failure. So, establishment of climate index insurance which would be helping the farmers in case of crop failure. Clear? So, that's called as what? That's called as climate adaptive agriculture. Fine. See, there were other terms also which should be known to us. One term which was used earlier was called as INDC. INDC stood for Intended Nationally Determined Contributions. And under INDC was prepared under the Warsaw Meet of 2013. The framework was prepared and it was implemented under the Paris Declaration. So, nations would themselves have to determine what contribution they would be making for global warming and climate change, and how they would be responsible for taking these initiatives. Nations would have to themselves determine. But when we are talking about this INDC, we can see that remember one thing about the Paris Declaration. Paris Declaration not only was responsible for implementing the INDC, but was also responsible for what? Was also responsible for emphasizing on transparency. Transparency का मतलब क्या है? Transparency means that nations would have to report emissions taking place from each and every sector. Clear? हर सेक्टर से, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन से, एग्रीकल्चर से जो भी एमिशन होता है उसे आप रिपोर्ट करेंगे. So, this was done under the Paris Declaration. So, when a question is asked that how the Paris Declaration is legally binding, is the Paris Declaration legally binding? So, as far as the Paris Declaration is concerned, it's not legally binding for determining contributions, but it is legally binding for reporting of emissions. Clear? it is legally binding for reporting of emissions. So, Paris Declaration is not legally binding for determining, you can change your contributions, because INDC, which was determined by India in the year 2015-16, was changed in the form of Panchamrit later on. So, our INDC today is now nothing but Panchamrit. Clear? The 5 objectives which was declared by the Prime Minister at the COP26, that is our INDC today. Clear? So, that stands, that is the INDC that we have today. So, that is called as Panchamrit. Now, that is why we said that as far as determining contribution is concerned, you can determine your contribution, you can shift that also, we have changed that also. But as far as reporting of emission is concerned, it is binding in nature. You have to report the emissions. Clear? So, it is supposed to be binding in nature. Clear? That is one thing. Now, the next thing that you have to know, as far as the Panchamrit is concerned, the target should be known for at least the preliminary examination. Panchamrit are the 5 objectives given by the Prime Minister under the national statement at the COP26 2021. And the first target is developing 500 gigawatt of energy through non-fossil fuel sources. Through non-fossil fuel sources. Then the second target is what? Second target is 50% of energy requirement of India. 50% of energy requirement of India. Would be coming from renewable sources. 50% of energy requirement of India would be coming from renewable sources. Now, the third is what? The third is that these are 2. The third happens to be what? It is that India would be also responsible for the carbon intensity of GDP. The carbon intensity of GDP means there is a correlation between GDP growth and carbon emissions. So, this correlation is called as carbon intensity of GDP of India should be reduced by 45%. Clear? And that is by 2030. All the targets are by 2030. Fine. And then also we say that India would be responsible for what? India would be responsible for establishing carbon sinks for 1 billion ton of CO2, obviously of the total projected emissions, and this would be done by 2030. And then there was emphasis on India to declare net zero. So, India declared net zero by 2070. Clear? Because under the Paris Declaration we can see clear. So, we can see under the Paris Declaration, India was Paris Declaration says what? Paris Declaration says that the target of Paris Declaration can be met only if equalization of emission takes place by nation by the mid of the century. Clear? So, if you are responsible for equalizing your emissions by mid of this century, then only the target of Paris Declaration can be met. So, here we are saying that the target of Paris Declaration would be met, but India declared its net zero by 2070, not by the mid of this century. So, here India is lagging behind. Clear? Now, this is Panchamrit. Earlier the INDC is now defunct, so they won't be asking you an examination that what is India's INDC as such. Clear? Now, this is Panchamrit. Now, also you can see that apart from this, there are other terms that deserves attention, and one such terms that needs to be known to you is called as what? It is called as, first of all, let's take RED plus. Now, RED stands for what? RED plus stands for reduction of emission, reduction of emission from deforestation and forest degradation So suppose deforestation takes place, CO2 level would be enhancing. If forest degradation takes place, CO2 level would be enhancing. Clear? So the emission which has enhanced due to deforestation and forest degradation needs to be reduced. Clear? Needs to be reduced. Yes, fine. Everything is fine, under control. Let's move forward and try to now fulfill the midnight aspiration as such of covering environment and max to max what can be covered. Now this is called as, now this Red Plus initiative comes under a broader initiative, and that broader initiative is called as Biocarbon Initiative for Sustainable Landscape, which is for reducing emissions from land surface. So under that emission Red Plus initiative comes. So you can see the framework of Red Plus was prepared at Shivam. All very fine, thank you. Now we can see that the framework of Red Plus was prepared. It was prepared at the Warsaw meet in 2013. But as far as Red Plus is concerned, what needs to be done for this purpose? Under the Red Plus initiative, we would be enhancing forest cover. And we would be enhancing forest cover where? We would be enhancing forest cover in developing nations. And in developing nations, we would be enhancing forest cover with the help of tribal community, with the help of local community as such. So that would be enhanced. And when this would be enhanced, this would be reducing the emission which has taken from deforestation and forest degradation as such. Clear? When this is enhanced, it would be reducing emission which has taken place from deforestation and forest degradation. But as far as Red Plus initiative is concerned, we can see that if you are engaging the tribal community or the local community in enhancing forest cover, why should they work for you? Until and unless there is a certain incentive given to them. So the incentive for them would be coming from Red Plus fund. And in Red Plus fund, any donor nations can contribute. Any donor nations can contribute in Red Plus fund, but it would be managed by what? It would be managed by the World Bank. Clear? So we can see in Red Plus fund, any donor nation can contribute, and this would be managed by whom? This would be managed by World Bank. So UPSC asked you that who is responsible for managing the Red Plus fund? It is the World Bank which is responsible for managing the Red Plus fund. Clear? Fine. Now, if you talk about forest in India, we can see the forest cover of India is what? The forest cover of India is 21.7%. And this forest cover is responsible for neutralizing only 11% of India's emission. The rest 89% is not neutralized. 21.7% is according to the SFR. Yes, Red Plus to Red Plus is from a forest to forest management concept. Yes, definitely. Now, 21.7% is according to the SFR, that is State of Forest Report 2021, which is responsible for equalizing only 11% of India's emission. The rest 89% is not equalized, and that's the reason why we were responsible for declaring late our net zero, because we declared net zero by 2070 as such. Clear? But if suppose we have to plant vegetation, enhance forest cover and have to plant vegetation, then what kind of vegetation should be planted for this purpose? Now, the vegetation which should be preferred for more and more of carbon absorption, the vegetation which should be preferred for more and more of CO2 absorption would be what? It would be coconut palm. That's the first in ranking. If you have to enhance forest cover, these things should be planted. Second is neem tree. Just not the antifungal qualities of neem tree, which is of great value, but also it is carbon sequestration. Then also mango tree. Mango tree. Then also not only mango tree, but we would be responsible for also planting mango tree, and we would be responsible for not only planting mango tree, but also tamarind, obviously tamarind tree. And the last one is what? The fifth one is eucalyptus. These are 5 big absorbers of CO2, but now connected with the Paris Declaration. And also at the COP26, what initiative were taken? We can see Article 5 of the Paris Declaration deals with the RED Plus initiative. Which article? Article 5 of the Paris Declaration deals with the RED Plus initiative. And at the COP27, and at the COP, not 27, 26, that is Glasgow, an initiative was taken. And this initiative, that is 2021, and this initiative was called as what? It was called as Glasgow Leaders Declaration. Glasgow Leaders Declaration, or it is also referred to as Global Leaders Declaration, because this is for the purpose, and more than 100 countries were signatory to it, and the purpose of it is to halt deforestation. Deforestation by what? By 2030. Clear? To halt deforestation by 2030. So that's called as Glasgow Leaders Declaration, or that is referred to as what? The Global Leaders Declaration, and the purpose is to halt deforestation by 2030. So that's how RED Plus can be connected to the contemporary issues. Right? Now, next thing that you have to know is what is called as Green Climate Fund. Next term is Green Climate Fund. So let's talk about Green Climate Fund. Fine. Now, Green Climate Fund, the framework of this fund was prepared where? The framework of this fund was prepared in the year 2009, and that was at the Copenhagen meet that this framework was prepared. We say that framework was prepared, but it was formed when? Formed in COP 16, and that it was at Cancun. But it was implemented under, was to be implemented under Paris Declaration. Paris Declaration. That's COP 21st. Now, as far as Green Climate Fund is concerned, under this fund, last लस्सी पी. यस शिवम, लस्सी पी. थोड़ी सी लस्सी बची है. फाइन, लस्सी पी. लेकिन we'll continue with lassis and thumbs up and some also tea. Okay, implemented in Paris Declaration, Green Climate Fund. Now we can see that as far as Green Climate Fund is concerned, under this fund, $100 billion, $100 billion was to be transferred from developed to developing nation, was to be transferred from developed to developing nation. Starting when? Starting 2020. Starting 2020. It was to be transferred from developed to developing nation starting 2020. Yes, 4 hours to world record. I'm going to make a world record. But my intention is not of making world record. My intention is your welfare. Clear? You benefit from it. I'm ready to make a world record, but you benefit from it. Now, it would be transferred from developed to developing nation under 2020. Clear? From 2020, and every year It's not once that $100 billion would be transferred from developed to developing nation, and this would be transferred. So we can see that when it is transferred from developed to developing nation, obviously the developing nation would be responsible for utilizing this fund for mitigating the adverse impact of global warming and climate change. That's the Green Climate Fund. But when you talk about Green Climate Fund is based on what? It is based on polluter pays principle. Those who were responsible for polluting the atmosphere of the earth should be responsible for funding the mitigation measures. Clear? Then Green Climate Fund is also based on ecological depth. Under the colonial or imperial rule, those who were responsible for exploiting the developing countries should be responsible for fundigating their mitigation measures. So these are two principles on which it is based. But as far as Green Climate Fund is called, Green Climate Fund never came into force. And the reason was what? Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump, you know, very famous president of US, the former president of US, he said that global warming does not take place. Global warming is a myth. And if Green Climate Fund is implemented, the burden would be on US because the biggest emitter is US. So if suppose $100 billion is coming from developed to developing nation, the contribution would be made as per the emissions, and biggest emitter is US. So that's why we can say that US was responsible for walking out of the Paris Declaration. Clear? Walking out. So this was mainly Green Climate Fund. But then comes in the year 2021, when our respected Prime Minister visited Glasgow to attend the COP26, our respected Prime Minister emphasized on, I call him respected, emphasized on what? He emphasized on the climate finance of $1 trillion. कहाँ से जोड़ लें बच्चों इसे? Copenhagen से. Of $1 trillion to be immediately transferred from developed to developing nation. Clear? To be immediately transferred from developed to developing nation. Yes, US behaves like ostrich in storm. Very good. Now, immediately transferred from developed to developing nation. Now, this is the history of, and this is the history of what is called as Loss and Damage Fund, which was decided at COP27, that is Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. Clear? So we can see the Green Climate Fund took the form of climate finance, and then at the COP27 it took the form of what? It took the form of what is called as Loss and Damage Fund. Loss and Damage Fund. Clear? Loss and Damage Fund. So Loss and Damage Fund जो है, it was decided at what? Decided at COP27. That's Sharm el Sheikh. Everybody knows that. But they can confuse you. They can confuse you with the words. Clear? They can confuse you with the words. Now tell me, then when we are talking about Loss and Damage Fund, Loss and Damage Fund is for what purpose? How it would be helping the developing nation? What were the words used at COP27? Now at the COP27, the words which were used for Loss and Damage Fund was what? That it would be utilized by developing nation. It would be utilized by developing nation to rebuild physical and social infrastructure. See the words, physical and social, not physical and economic infrastructure. Physical and social infrastructure which has suffered due to 3 decades of adverse impact of global warming and climate change. So it would be utilized by developing nation to develop the physical and social infrastructure which has suffered due to 3 decades of adverse impact of global warming and climate change. Clear? And as far as this fund is concerned, this fund took the form of loss and damage, but yet we can see that the cash inflows in this fund is yet to be decided. How the fund would be constituted is yet to be decided, so it may take time. So that's called as Green Climate Fund and Red Plus. Now, there are some other initiatives also. One term is called as what? It is called as Climate Vulnerable Forum. It's called as what? It's called as Climate Vulnerable Forum. So that's called as Climate Vulnerable Forum. And what is Climate Vulnerable Forum? Now, climate, we can see at the COP22nd. COP21st was conducted at Paris. COP22nd was conducted at Marrakesh. And at this COP, a group of 47 nations, they declared that they would be the first to turn their economies green. And they would be the first to turn their economies green with zero emissions. So, there is a group of 47 nations, and they at the COP22nd said that is in the year 2016, said that they would be the first to turn their economies green. Economies green means with zero emissions. So, they would be the first to turn their economies green with zero emissions. With zero emissions. With zero emissions. Fine. So, they would be the first to turn their economies green with zero emissions, and they will neutralize their emissions. Neutralize their emissions. Now, we can see that there are carbon neutral nations. For example, Bhutan is a carbon neutral nation. In India, there is a village which is called as Minangadhi village. Minangadhi. Minangadhi village. This is it is present in the Wayanad district. This is present in the Wayanad district, and this village, that is Minangadhi village, which is present in the Wayanad district. Now, it is said to be the first carbon neutral village of India. Clear? First carbon neutral village of India. So, that's called as Minangadhi village. And as far as this village is concerned, it has a tree plantation program through which it was responsible for neutralizing its emission. So, that village is called as the Minangadhi village. And as far as the Climate Vulnerable Forum is concerned, these group of nations are what? These are tiny islands. Tiny islands. And they face the threat of what? They face the threat of submergence. Submergence due to rising sea level. So, they are tiny islands, small island we can say, not tiny, but they face the threat of submergence due to rising sea level. Now, please do not say conference of phonics from conference of parties. Well, good evening, Pinkor. So, please do not say so, because there's some relevance to it still. Now, these are, but see, at this, now connect it to COP26 and at the COP26 that was conducted at Glasgow, India will take the credit, because if our Prime Minister takes every credit, we'll also take the credit. We'll do the same. So, India was responsible for helping in establishment of what? In establishment of infrastructure for resilient island nations. So, we were responsible for helping establishing infrastructure for resilient island nation. Resilient island nation. Island nations. So that they can face the adverse impact of global warming and climate change. Clear? Fine. So that they can face the adverse impact of global warming and climate change. बच्चों थकना मना है, सुभाष थकना मना है. आज देखो मैं नहीं थका हूं तो आप नहीं थकोगे. Clear? Let's continue. So, infrastructure for resilient island nations. Now, the next term that you have to know, see, COP 23rd 2017 was to be held in Fiji, conducted in Fiji. Clear? हाँ नहीं थको प्लीज़ बच्चों, आज थोड़ा सा आज देखो वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड बनाने में तुम मेरे साथ रहोगे तभी तो मैं वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड बुलाऊंगा, तो ये भी तो होगा ना कि तुम भी साथ थे वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड में. वी वेयर द विटनेस टू दैट सेशन. क्लियर? एंड मेरी एनर्जी अभी नहीं, अभी तो मैं गरमाना शुरू हुआ हूँ. Fine, I'll continue. Don't worry. Don't worry. I'll continue. I'll continue. Now see, COP 23rd was to be convened in Fiji. And why? Because Fiji was holding the presidency of UNFCCC, and I have said that the countries which is responsible for holding the presidency, in that territory only the COP should be conducted. In that territory only the COP should be conducted. But for political reason the venue was shifted. So it is called as what? It is called as Bonn Conference. क्या कहते हैं इसे? Bonn Conference. So it was conducted in Bonn. But the declaration is called as Fiji Declaration. Fiji Declaration. Now there were many initiatives taken. One initiative was called as what? One initiative was called as the Telanoa initiative. Telanoa initiative का मतलब है कि it would be helping the developed nations, not developed or developing nation, it would be helping the nations in order to implement their INDC. So that was called as Telanoa initiative. But we can see that another initiative was called as what? It was called as, one initiative was called as, I'm writing here, Telanoa initiative. Now this may not be asked in exam, because that's not very relevant as such. Now this was for the purpose of helping nations in order to implement its INDC. Clear? But second initiative was called as what? Second initiative was called as the Corynevia Joint Work for Agriculture. Corynevia Joint Work for Agriculture. And that's also not very relevant as such, because Corynevia Joint Work for Agriculture was what? It was for the adjustment of the agriculture sector. Adjustment of agriculture sector. And after this we'll have a test on COP 27. Clear? We already had a test on CBD, Convention on Biodiversity. Now we'll conduct a objective test on COP 27. So we can see Corynevia Joint Work for Agriculture was adjustment of the agriculture sector. And for what purpose? Now in the limelight of global warming and climate change, so that it can bear the impact of global warming and climate change. But having said so, the most important initiative which was taken at the COP 23rd, that is Fiji Declaration, was called as what? It was called as Powering Past Coal Alliance. Powering Past Coal Alliance. Clear? Now powering past coal alliance means what? See, powering means development of energy, मतलब ऊर्जा तैयार करना, and past means beyond the use of coal. So developing energy beyond the use of coal, developing energy without the use of coal. Clear? So that alliance is called as Powering Past Coal Alliance. Now this was launched by a group of 30 nations. Launched by a group of 30 nations which included UK, Canada, a group of 30 nations which included UK, Canada, and today we can see that this group has more than 100 members. Now 100 members do not include only nations. 100 members also include subnational entities, business organizations, but more than 30 nations are present. India is not a member of this alliance. Why? Because India's dependency on coal is very large. Clear? But this alliance, Powering Past Coal Alliance, is for the purpose of developing energy. Objective is energy without coal. Without coal. And that is by 2030. Clear? Energy without coal by 2030. So developing energy without the use of coal by 2030, that's the objective. India is not a member, but this alliance is very famously called as Non-Proliferation Treaty. Non-Proliferation Treaty. Treaty on Fossil Fuels. Non-Proliferation Treaty on Fossil Fuels. Clear? Fossil fuel. But then it is based on what? It is based on, see, IPCC report. When again come to IPCC report, the IPCC assessment report of 2015 said that why the world cannot afford temperature beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade, because that would be a catastrophic situation. And IPCC report was also responsible for suggesting certain pathways for this purpose. And these pathways included what? These pathways included these pathways were responsible for including what? These pathways included rejecting the use of coal, rejecting the use of oil, rejecting the use of gas. Why? Because if you talk about the contribution of coal in greenhouse gas emission is what? The contribution of coal in greenhouse gas emission is 43%. If you talk about the contribution of oil in greenhouse gas emission is 34%. If you call about the contribution of gas, it is 18%. And then we can see one is a big culprit, and that is cement industry. So when you are talking about cement industry is responsible for contributing 4.9% in total greenhouse gas emission. Clear? 4.9% in total greenhouse gas emission. And cement industry is also responsible for oceanic acidification as one of the second factors. So if a question on cement industry is asked, cement industry is a big culprit. Clear? Big culprit. So this is Non-Proliferation Treaty on Fossil Fuels, and we can say that Powering Past Coal Alliance is based on what? It is based on the pathways suggested by what? Suggested by IPCC. Clear? Pathways suggested by IPCC. Now that's called as Powering Past Coal Alliance. But at the COP27 you can see that, and you would have read in the newspaper, that there was an initiative taken by a small island, and that small island is called as Vanuatu. And this initiative was called as Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, to reject the use of fossil fuel, which was obviously defeated, but this was started by Vanuatu. So just remember that initiative was called as Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, and Powering Past Coal Alliance is called as Non-Proliferation Treaty on Fossil Fuel. Is that clear? Fine. So that's called as Non-Proliferation Treaty on Fossil Fuel. Now let's move forward. Now next now. See, when you talk about COP24th was conducted at, in the year 2018, it was conducted at Katowice. Katowice is in Poland, and nothing significant was made. Why? Because it was mainly for the purpose of, yes, there can be questions related to IPCC reports sometimes, but remember that IPCC was what? It was formed in the year 1988 to conduct a scientific social impact of these kind of occurrences. India is a part of IPCC. They can ask you, but it would be better that if we study. Clear? Because you have to link all these things together. Now this was conducted at Katowice in Poland, and the purpose is what? The purpose was to study study the rules which are related to the implementation of the Paris Declaration. So that's not very significant as such. But when we talk about COP25th, it was conducted at Madrid. Although it was considered as a failure because the implementation of Paris Declaration was to be made in the year 2020, and it appeared that all the nations have failed. Even the developing nations like India, China, etc. were accused that not taking sincere steps for the implementation of Paris Declaration. But at this declaration, we can see two steps were taken. One step which was taken was called as European New Green Deal. European New Green Deal. And European New Green Deal means that by help of this deal, Europe would become the first continent of the world. Europe would become the first continent of the world to attain net zero, by 2050. And this is as per Paris Declaration. But another step was what? Another step was called as Climate Ambition Coalition. Ambition Coalition. And Climate Ambition Coalition was a group of 73 countries headed by Chile, and the purpose was to attain net zero by 2050. Net zero by 2050. When we talk about UNEP report, that is emission gap report of 2020. Now this emission gap report says what? It says that in the year 2019, the total greenhouse gas emission which was taking place was roughly 59.1 gigatons. When you talk about, suppose, emission gap report, there are many emission gap reports, but we have selected one here, and that is of 2020, and that is given by UNEP. Now this report says that if we consider 2019, the total greenhouse gas emitted was 59.1 gigatons, gigatons of CO2 equivalent. That's how it's represented, 59.1 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. And certainly, if we are moving at this pace, if we roughly move at this pace, then the temperature enhancement of Earth would be, by the end of this century, what? It would be crossing the target of the Paris Declaration. So it would be more than 3%, 3.7 degrees centigrade, if we move at this pace. Clear? So it was suggested that if suppose we have to reduce our temperature, suppose if the temperature has to be reduced, and if you have to meet the target of less than 2 degrees centigrade enhancement, you have to reduce this emission to what? This emission to at least 41 gigaton of CO2 equivalent by 2030, then only you can meet the target of 2 degrees centigrade, less than 2 degrees centigrade. And if suppose you have to meet the target of 1.5 degrees centigrade, then you have to reduce this emission by 25 gigatons of CO2 equivalent by 2030. That was mentioned in emission gap report. Clear? That's what mentioned in emission gap report. Clear? And we can see that in 2019, if the greenhouse gas emission was 59.1 gigatons of CO2 equivalent, then in 2020 it reduced what? It reduced by 7%. In 2020, due to the COVID pandemic, the greenhouse gases emission was reduced by about 7%. But this hardly translates into temperature reduction of Earth. It only reduced the temperature of Earth by 0.01 degree centigrade. Clear? 0.01 degree centigrade, it reduced the temperature of Earth. So if this be the case, that the temperature of Earth would be reduced by this, so UNEP was responsible for suggesting one thing, that this phase of reduced industrial activity due to the COVID pandemic should be utilized to meet the target of Paris Declaration. And this is called as what? This is referred to as green pandemic recovery. Clear? So if they ask you what do you understand by green pandemic recovery, this is what is called as green pandemic recovery, that the condition of Reduced industrial activity because of the COVID pandemic should be utilized for meeting the target of Paris Declaration, and this is called as what? This is called as green pandemic recovery. And we can see the silver lining is what? Silver lining is more than 120 nations of the world has committed to net zero, which includes the European Green New Deal, and it also includes what? It also includes the Climate Ambition Coalition, which we have just now talked about, because these are in accordance with the green pandemic recovery. Clear? Green pandemic recovery. Now, this is called as green pandemic recovery. And in this limelight, it is said that the UNEP was responsible for proposing some thematic areas. There should be some thematic areas. And one such thematic area which was proposed by UNEP was what? That there should be reduced industrial activity, more and more renewable energy, electrical vehicles should be more used. But one is very unique, plant-based diets. Plant-based diet should be preferred. Whatever diet we use, we should be plant-based. So we should be turning vegan. Clear? We should be turning vegan for green pandemic recovery. And why? Because if you drink milk, it contributes to global warming. If you eat meat, it contributes into global warming. Why? Because ruminants are contributing into global warming 14.5%. Greenhouse gas emission 14.5%. So they are one of the biggest culprits, and we get meat and milk from them. So ruminants are contributing into global warming 14.5%, and artificial breeding of these animals is taking place to meet the demand of milk and meat. So if more artificial breeding takes place, more emission will be taking place from them. So the emission which is taking place from ruminants include what? Methane, CO2, nitrous oxide. So they are a big culprit for greenhouse gases. That's why we say that plant-based diet should be preferred. Turn vegan instead of milk and meat consumption, because milk and meat consumption is responsible for enhancing the adverse impact of global warming. Clear? Fine. Now at the COP26 we can see not only Panchamrit was announced by India, not only the infrastructure for resilient island nation step was taken, and not only this was taken, but also not only the the Glasgow Leaders Declaration was passed, but at COP26, one initiative was taken by our Prime Minister, which is called as One World, One Grid, One Sun initiative. And One World, One Grid, One Sun initiative is for the purpose of what? It is for the purpose of transference of renewable energy from one country to another. But the most important part of that COP26 was a pledge which was taken by 104 nations. And this pledge which was taken by 104 nations can figure as questions sometimes, anytime in examination, and that's called as what? It's called as Global Methane Pledge. Global Methane Pledge. So when we say global methane pledge, methane is a concern, and methane is a concern because of many reasons. One, methane is a concern because this is although short-lived in atmosphere, but we can see the heat retention capacity of methane is 25 to 28 times than that of CO2. Clear? So that's one thing. Second is oxidation of methane is responsible for generating surface level ozone, and surface level ozone is not only a pollutant but also part of what? Also part of secondary air pollutant, which is photochemical smog. Clear? And also when methane comes in contact with hydroxyl in atmosphere, it turns into water vapor and CO2, which are two types of greenhouse gases. Water vapor and CO2, which are two types of greenhouse gases. One is short-lived, that is water vapor. The heat retention capacity is twice than that of CO2. And second is CO2, which stays in the atmosphere from 120 to 200 years. Clear? 120 to 200 years. So that's called as, that's why methane is a concern. Fine. And methane is also the second most abundantly greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere. So methane is a concern. But to phase out methane. 104 nations, that's why we are saying that why methane is a concern. 104 nations were responsible for signing this pledge, and this pledge was signed at COP26 2021. And the objective is what? The objective is that 30% of methane emission, 30% of methane emission would be reduced by 2030. Clear? And if this is reduced, then the temperature of Earth would be reduced by 0.2 degrees centigrade. See, if we say Kigali Agreement, if Kigali Agreement is successful, then the temperature of Earth would reduce by 0.5 degrees centigrade. But if global methane pledge is successful, then the temperature of Earth would reduce by 0.2 degree centigrade. Clear? 0.2 degree centigrade. So that's global methane pledge. But the biggest problem, hardship in this is what? That 3 countries are there. And these 3 countries are responsible for contributing 35% in methane emission. And these 3 countries include what? It includes Russia, it includes China, and we'll put ourselves at last, India. Clear? And all these 3 countries are not a part of global methane pledge. Clear? They are not a part of global methane pledge. So that's also, so let's COP26 completed. Now come to COP27 and solve a test first of all because you have studied COP27 through newspapers. So let's solve a test. See, the first question. Consider the following statements and select the correct code. Now, it is said that ecocide has been defined by jurists as unlawful acts with a knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by these acts. We know that these acts would be responsible for causing damage to the environment, yet we are indulging in this kind of act. Clear? Yet we are indulging in this kind of act. So that's ecocide. Ecocide applies to private companies and their executives in their personal capacity. It has been termed as a type of pollution also. So tell me that, have you any idea about ecocide? The first question. Now the answer to this is what? Methane gas is used for fuel. Definitely it is used for fuel. This CNG that you use is nothing but methane. Clear? Now see, if we are talking about ecocide, remember that all 3 options are correct. All 3 options are correct. And why ecocide? Why ecocide on discussed in the COP27? See, at the COP27, we can see on the sidelines of COP27, ecocide was discussed by member nation. And it was to be approved by UN. It is to be approved by UN as what? As one of the atrocides. When you talk about UN, UN is responsible for approving 4 kinds of atrocides. UN approves 4 types of atrocides. One is called as genocide. Second is called as ethnic cleansing. So this is, according to UN, is called as atrocide. 4th is called as war crimes. And 5th is called as crime against humanity. Fifth is called as crime against humanity. So there are 4 types of atrocides which has been recognized by UN. We can see Now we can see that these 4 types of heterocides, genocide, now UN is going to recognize another type of heterocide, and that would be called as what? That would be called as ecocide. You know that it is going to damage the environment, yet you are indulging in this act. So that's called as ecocide. So if suppose you are manager of executive of private companies also, you would be liable for that, and it has been termed as a type of pollution also. All the 3 options are correct. Clear? Next. Pushed by civil society, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is a broad and legally enforceable proposal for phasing out our global dependence on fossil fuel. It is considered as one of the key failures. This was failed. See, it is considered as one of the key failures of COP27. This treaty was started by which island nation? This is Vanuatu. Clear? But this is Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And what we have studied under the COP23 was what? It was Non-Proliferation Treaty on Fossil Fuel, which is also called as Powering Past Coal Alliance. Clear? Powering Past Coal Alliance. Now see, which one of the following is incorrect related to Amazon Headwaters Initiative? Now, it is an initiative led by indigenous people. This initiative includes a feasible plan to provide legal protection to most important ecosystem on earth. Amazon countries consists of 8 countries. This initiative prohibits any further fossil fuel development in the headwaters of Amazon. See, as far as this question is concerned, question number 3. Now, as far as this question is concerned, Amazon Headwaters Initiative, we can see that this initiative is for what? This initiative is for removing fossil fuel production from the headwaters of Amazon. Headwaters means the source of Amazon. Clear? The wrong option is what? 8 countries, because it is consisting of 6 countries mainly. But all the other options are correct. And Amazon Headwater Initiative was taken by the indigenous people, and this was discussed also at the COP27. Clear? Now, next question. This just now we have discussed. The loss and damage fund agreed upon is a key outcome of COP27. Clear? We are saying that loss and damage fund is a key outcome of COP27. Which one of the following statement is incorrect? See, it is a fund to rescue and rebuild physical and social infrastructure of developing countries by extreme weather. That's correct, because for 3 decades they have suffered. Now, the Association of Small Island State is a group of not 30, that's 39 small island nations, and low-lying coastal developing states would largely get benefited from this fund. That's true. But the number is wrong. That is what? 39. Loss and damage forms the 3rd leg of comprehensive global response to climate change, the others being mitigation and adaptation. That's correct. 3rd leg is what? 3rd leg, and the other 2 is mitigation and adaptation. That's correct. There is no agreement yet on how the finance should be provided. That's also true. But what is wrong is B option. And I think that you have clear. Now see, next. At the COP27, some countries try to reach 1.5 degree centigrade goal. मतलब से भ्रष्ट करने की कोशिश किया. But a resolution to cause emission to peak was taken out to the dismay of many. Nations can peak emissions by which one of the following years? Now the years when the nation can peak their emission is what? 2025. 2025. Clear? At which one of the following venues COP28 would be held? Now that is what, tell me. A, Dubai. So that would be held. Fine. We'll cover up. Don't worry. We'll start now. Pollution only. Fine. The last question. Which one of the following involves making unsubstantiated claim to deceive consumers into into believing that a company's products are environmental friendly? Now that is called as what? That's called as, ये देखो इसमें क्या होता है कि ये companies कहती हैं कि this is environmental friendly, but this is not. Now this is called as greenwashing. It's also called as what? It's also called as green sheen. These are some new questions for you. Clear? देखो अप्रोच बच्चों क्या है ना, अप्रोच है कि न्यूज़पेपर में और जो ये मार्केट में भी तुमको देखो कई मटेरियल मिलते हैं, केएसजी का कनेक्ट है, माई नोट्स है, ये सारे मिलते हैं। और मैं ये नहीं कर रहा हूँ कि भाई मेरे ही इंस्टीट्यूट के आप पढ़ो, ठीक है, मेरे इंस्टीट्यूट के पढ़ो और भी देखो, और उसके बाद उसे देखो कि क्या कॉमन चीज़ है। क्लियर? क्या कॉमन चीज़ है, क्या रिलेवेंट है, इंपॉर्टेंट है, इन मटेरियल्स को थोड़ा सा लेकर देखो आप। अभी बहुत सारे मटेरियल्स आए हुए हैं मार्केट में, और ये सभी क्वेश्चंस बनते हैं आपके। ये नहीं कि आप शंकर आईएएस लेकर बैठ जाओ सुबह से शाम तक, मालूम हुआ कि एक भी क्वेश्चन नहीं आया, तो शंकर साहब कुछ नहीं कर पाएंगे, मैं भी कुछ नहीं कर पाऊंगा। क्लियर? सो प्लीज, कंटेम्प्रेरी क्वेश्चंस आते हैं और इसी तरह के क्वेश्चंस आते हैं, ऐसे क्वेश्चन बुक्स में होने चाहिए। क्लियर? But books are virtually Google these days. So this is, I request you to go through the current connect of KSG once. एक बार जो है ना KSG के करंट कनेक्ट में कहीं से बात कर लो इंस्टीट्यूट से, वो दे देंगे आपको। तो उनके जो करंट कनेक्ट के हमारे जो इंस्टीट्यूट के हैं ना, उसको एक बार सिलसिलेवार ढंग से देख लो, तो बहुत सारी चीज़ें आ जाएंगी दिमाग में, और हो सकता है कि 30-40 क्वेश्चन वहीं से आ जाए आपको सिर्फ। ये भी क्योंकि कुछ इकोनॉमिक्स के क्वेश्चन, कुछ इन्वायरमेंट के क्वेश्चन तो वहीं से आ जाएं। तो मैं एक बार रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि एक बार सरसराती निगाह से, अभी बहुत टाइम है। क्लियर? अभी बहुत टाइम है, एक दिन अगर एक कनेक्ट को भी देखोगे तब भी बहुत ज़्यादा है। क्लियर? तो आप प्लीज़ करो उसे, इट वुड बी बेनिफिशियल फॉर यू। फाइन? बेनिफिशियल फॉर यू। नसी, नेक्स्ट थिंग दैट विल डू इज कवर अप। एक छोटा सा क्वेश्चन है बीच में कि किसी ने पूछा है, so we'll try to answer that question and then we'll move to pollution. And since plastic pollution is in the news, fine, since plastic pollution is always in the news and 1 or 2 questions on plastic pollution can be asked, so we'll try to cover up all those things. Fine. See, the adverse impact of global warming does not include rise in sea level and erratic rainfall or frequency of droughts and floods enhancing. The adverse impact of global warming also includes expansion of dead water zones. Dead water zones are water bodies in which the dissolved oxygen level reduces. Fine, we are saying that dead water zones. हाँ चलो, मैं कराता हूँ प्लास्टिक आपको, अभी कराता हूँ प्लास्टिक, और ऐसे क्वेश्चंस कराऊंगा जो हो सकता है कि आप आ भी सकते हैं आपको। फाइन नसी, कमर कस लो बच्चों। लेट अस बी स्ट्रॉन्गर एंड लेट्स, और देखो मैं तो हंसते हंसते खिला रहा हूँ तुम्हें कि पढ़ाते जा रहा हूँ, और अभी रात भी बाकी है। सो विल ट्राई टू कवर अप मोर एंड मोर। नसी, first thing that you have to know in this case is the expansion of DWZ, dead water zones. Now we are saying Dead water zones are water bodies in which the dissolved oxygen level reduces. Somebody has asked me question, eutrophication, etc. I just remember that it needs to be answered here. So it needs to be answered. So let's cover up that. And dead water zone, generally in water body, the dissolved oxygen level is present. And that is essential for the survival of marine organisms. Clear? But if suppose the dissolved oxygen level reduces, if the dissolved oxygen level reduces, then it would be leading to the formation of what is called as dead water zones. So dead water zones are water bodies in which the dissolved oxygen level has reduced. Clear? Dead water zones are water bodies in which the dissolved oxygen level has reduced. So there are three types of dead water zone. Now the first type of dead water zone would be called as what? It would be referred to as terrestrial DWZ. Terrestrial dead water zone. Now this terrestrial DWZ would be formed in what? It would be formed in lakes. Suppose this is a lake. It has dissolved oxygen level, but it would be formed in the lakes. And it would be formed in the lakes, how? Due to deposition of sediment. The sediment gets deposited in the lakes. So when sediments are getting deposited in the lakes, the sediments can get deposited in the lakes by many ways. Clear? By yes, thank you so much, Rakesh Lakra. Fine. I won't say good night because my good morning is going to be there today, so I won't be responsible for saying good night to you all. लेकिन चलो आगे बढ़ो इसे, आगे बढ़ो जल्दी जल्दी करो इसे. Now terrestrial DWZ, it is due to deposition of sediment, and when sediment gets deposited in the lake, the lakes are gradually filled up. So aging of lakes which takes place. Filling of lakes matlab aging of lakes. But these sediments are responsible for enhancing the nutrient content of the lake. Enhancing the nutrient content of the lake. So what happens when sediment gets deposited in the lakes and nutrient content of the lakes would enhance? Then we can see that algae which are present in the lakes would be utilizing these sediments to grow in large numbers. And this phenomena would be called as what? This phenomena would be referred to as algal bloom. इसे क्या कहेंगे? Algal bloom. क्या कहते हैं? Algal bloom. Fine. But we know that algae, they are present in the lakes. They are responsible for what? They are present in large numbers. Algae are responsible for photosynthesis. So if they are responsible for photosynthesis, then what will happen? Then we can see that if they are responsible for photosynthesis, then the oxygen regeneration should take place. But here we have said that the process of deposition of sediment, which is not only responsible for aging of lakes, but also enhancing its nutrient content, would be called as what? It would be called as eutrophication. Eutrophication. And due to eutrophication, only algal bloom has taken place. So algae in large numbers cannot withstand their weight. They would be submerging. And when they submerge, they would be utilizing dissolved oxygen level. मान लो कि वो algae जो हैं वो submerge कर जाते हैं, तो submerge क्या हो जाएगा? So if they submerge, the dissolved oxygen would be utilized, and the dissolved oxygen would be utilized by microorganism for the decomposition of these algae. तो dissolved oxygen अगर मान लो utilize होता है microorganism के द्वारा for the decomposition of this algae, see, the difference is many because the foundation environmental courses are different, and the marathon we are responsible for delivering at a very high speed. Dictation is also in the class. Some excerpts are dictated, so explained also. This is marathon session is mainly for revision purpose. But the vibes are different when you join the foundation course. Clear? Now this is called as eutrophication and this is called as algal bloom. And algal bloom takes place due to eutrophication only. Algae, they cannot withstand their weight. They would be submerging down. And when they submerge, they would be decomposed by saprophytic bacteria utilizing the dissolved oxygen level. And if the dissolved oxygen level is utilized, then certainly the formation of dead water zones would be taking place. Sometimes dead water zones are referred to as what? It's also referred to as biological deserts. For example, Yamuna is called as a biological desert. Why? Because of the formation of dead water zones. Clear? Now this kind of dead water zone would be called as terrestrial. But it's not that. Only terrestrial dead water zones are seen. In the coastal areas also, dead water zones would be seen. But in this case, the main agency for deposition of sediment would be the rivers. So similar kind of dead water zone would be seen in the coastal areas. Similar kind of dead water zones would be seen in the coastal areas, where the main agency for deposition of sediment would be the rivers. Main agency for deposition of sediment would be the rivers. Algal bloom would take place in this space also. A dead water zone would be formed here also. But in this case, who is calling me Hemanta Viswa Sarma? Okay, let me look like the Chief Minister of Assam, Hemanta Viswa Sarma. Very good. And see, just we are coming to COP 27 also, Maitri. Some part of COP 27 we have discussed. Two other initiatives are left. I'll discuss that before. Definitely I'll discuss that. And then we'll have a question on series on plastic pollution also. So let's revise today. Now, what will happen is that the rivers will be and coastal DWZ will be formed. But when algae are present in large numbers in the coastal areas, some of the algae, for example, red algae, they are responsible for turning the water of coastal area red. And that's why this phenomena through which the water of the coastal area is turned red would be called as what? It would be called as red tide. Good evening, everybody. Somebody has joined now. Now, the basics of biology can be covered from, देखो एक NCERT की पुरानी एडिशन है, उसे ले लो बच्चे, वो मिल जाएगा तुम्हें कहीं पर और उसे कवर कर लो, ठीक है? नहीं कहोगे तो मैं दिलवा दूंगा इनको, आप PDF इनसे, PDF है मेरे पास उसकी, तो मैं इनको दे दूंगा, आप उससे कवर कर लो. अभी तो थोड़ा कम, if suppose preliminary examination is very near, so it would be difficult, but for next year you can take that. Fine. Now, now here we can see that the color of the water would be turning red. Now this phenomena is called as red tide. It may be due to the presence of algae. It can be also due to the toxins released by algae, that the color of the water would be turning red. Clear? Color of the water is turning red. Is that clear? This phenomena is called as red tide. But in the midst of the ocean, we can see dead water zone is present in the midst of the ocean also, and is present in the midst of the ocean from 600 to 1200 meters deep. Clear? In the middle of the ocean, it is present from 600 to 1200 meters deep. A natural dead water zone is present, which is called as OMZ. Now, due to global warming, what is happening? That dead water zones are expanding. And expanding why? Because if temperature enhances due to global warming, मैं फिर आता हूँ MCQs में, if temperature is enhancing due to global warming, we can see that not only if temperature is enhancing, the dissolution rate of oxygen in water would be getting reduced. And if dead water zone expands in the middle of the ocean, jellyfish from this area would be migrating to the coastal area. And this phenomena would be called as jellyfish bloom. So in the coastal areas, they would be responsible for jellyfish bloom, and they would be disrupting the coastal ecosystem. Disrupting the coastal ecosystem. Clear? Secret star, sir, you taught us IR in Keval January. Some countries are not covered. We told to the coordinator, but we will take the remaining classes. Okay, tell the coordinator whenever I'll also share the video of my classes. Don't worry about that. Refer current affairs. Are all red algae toxic? No, not red algae are toxic, but the toxins released by algae. Toxins released by algae. We entered all environmental crisis, right? It's necessary to watch the marathon for 2024. Yes, you can watch the marathon for 2024 because the number of questions are there. Now, no. Mathri has asked me that the remaining part of the COP27 has not been covered. So there are two initiatives which have been taken at COP27 which needs to be covered.